So, we look like we're ready. But this is day one. It's about the work. And I've said that from day one, and it'll always be the same message. It's about work. You got to go earn your right every year. It doesn't matter what the players are, the coaches, expectations, where you were, where you're going. We got to work, man.
Wants to throw it to Stewart. He caught it. He stole the first down. Oh, yes. The big man dives down to the 31-yard line. Oh, that is beautiful.
Let me tell you something. I love this team now. I got goosebumps, gentlemen. I love this team.
Fields looking, pressured, hit from behind, taken down. Aiden Hutchinson got him.
What do you think about the secondary?
Just look at the names. C.J. Gardner-Johnson. You drafted Branch.
It started off with that huge hit on Beasley.
Calling things out. There's a big hit right away. And boom!
Touchdown, Detroit Lions. Amon-Ra St. Brown. Goff dropped it in the bucket that time.
We're in our window now to win.
Aaron Rodgers exits the NFC North as a loser.
Hey, welcome to Rocked On Detroit Lions. Hey, how about that new intro? Man, I love it. It's looking good. And, only 50 hours worth of work this week to get it done, but it's still a work in progress. I'm loving the energy that the Detroit Lions are bringing, and I'm so happy to be here on this Friday night before the game. I'd like to welcome Andy, our co-host here on Rocked On Detroit Lions Off the Cuff. Welcome you to the stage, buddy. Say hi.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Go Lions, one pride.
Well, that didn't sound like a whole lot of energy, but I'm sure you'll get into it here in just a minute. All right, so I'm hoping that tonight we can get this chat working. If you wouldn't mind making sure you got it pulled up, Andy, and then you can see if things come in. It looks like it's going to work tonight. So I'd like to welcome everybody out there that's watching in Facebook land and YouTube, and welcome you all to the show. This is Rocked On Detroit Lions Off the Cuff, episode 26. And tonight we are going to preface tonight's game versus Carolina, talk about kind of what's going on with the Detroit Lions roster, and maybe a few predictions. I guess, the writing's kind of on the wall for a lot of the players on the roster, or at least the expected roster. We're going to run through some of the defensive topics, cornerbacks, safeties, Brian Branch, who's always the talk of every show, and just kind of give us a little bit of a run tonight on what to expect or not expect out of tonight's game, and where does it leave us, with 4 days before cut day. Big talent showcase on display tonight with Carolina. So, Andy, what's the first thing that comes to mind to you tonight, or what's the first thing that you'd like to share, or anything that you'd like to say to get us off to a good start?
Well, I would say one thing for sure. I know expectations for a game like tonight, they're not very high when you consider it's a preseason game, and it's the last preseason game of the season. Detroit's 1-1, and Carolina's 0-2. They haven't won a preseason game yet. I did look into it. Detroit is not starting anybody, any of their main starters. We know that Goff and like Biggs and Branch, they're going to be sitting. They're not going to be playing much. Some of the big names, but we do know that Carolina, I'm citing their webpage, Carolina's going to be starting all their offense and defensive starters. According to their coach, Frank Reich, he gave a number of about 20 reps, maybe less, maybe more, depending on how it goes. But that to me is going to build up to what I see will be what's going to happen with Detroit's second, third string players. How are they going to react to this, especially given what happened last week? So those are kind of my big expectations as to what we're going to see on the field. I know from a fan standpoint, I was kind of hoping to see some of the starters come out, but at the same time, I understand why they're not. I think at this point in preseason, you don't want to risk any of your big names at all. So kind of bummed out about that, but at the same time, it is preseason. And I'm hoping for a good game. I know everyone else is too. And Will, I'm going to kind of throw it back to you. What are you looking at with tonight's game against the Panthers?
Well, first, I guess I'll go back to kind of, what you were saying there is Frank Reich was saying 20 reps. So 20 reps is, it's kind of a lot of work if you think about it. Depending on how your offense and defensive series go, 20 reps is probably no less than 2 offensive series. Could be as many as 7, 6 offensive series. I mean, that's a half of a football game. So 20, I guess it really is going to depend tonight on, is the Lions defense, able to shut them down and they just pull the plug, or do they keep them in? What's your choice? Hey, we've got a few people in the chat tonight, and thanks for so far. We got Mary Ken and Tim. I am going to butcher your last name, Tom Domzalski. I apologize. But with his chat message, if I can pull it up here for some reason. There we go. Lions winning the Super Bowl. Gibbs, rookie and offensive player of the year. Coach Campbell, coach of the year. Hutch, defensive player of the year. And what's the last one say there?
And yes, I bet one unit on all those and back them on a podcast that I'm on.
All right. Well, that's awesome. Tim, what podcast are you on? We'd love to hear, see where you're at. That'd be great. Matter of fact, we'd love to have you come on our show. If you'd love to come on, we'd be more than happy to have you on. So
absolutely.
Let
me just give a quick hi to Mary real quick.
Yeah, I couldn't pull that one up for some reason. Still struggling with this chat, but it seems like it's working. So back to what we were saying. 20 reps is quite a lot of work. So I guess we'll see what happens tonight. If our offense is able to produce, which I don't think it's really going to be able to do a whole lot, and if the defense is able to stand firm in the trenches, that'll dictate how long these Carolina ones are actually in the game. But to your point, what is it going to do, for the Lions 2s and 3s as far as, a reaction like you had stated? And I think it's, they've got to step up and they've got to show that they're ready for the big stage. I mean, the only way to make a roster at this point, this late in the game, is you've got to show out in this final game. So if these 2s and 3s can step up and show that, they've earned their stripes to play on an NFL roster, tonight would be the night if Carolina really is going to start their starters and they play well. So be on the lookout for that tonight. How long do the Carolina starters really get in? How much action are they giving us? And are we able to respond? That would be a huge response if they were able to stand firm and keep them off the scoreboard. So, Eddie, I guess, quick prediction here. 1s versus 2s. We've seen this preseason already that it hasn't been the easiest for the Lions, offense to get moving. The second and third team offense just, they haven't done a damn thing all preseason long, which is expected to a degree. So our 2s and 3s on offense versus Carolina 1s, you think we're going to get the ball in the end zone?
Getting the ball in the end zone, I'm not going to say it's not possible, but that kind of brings me to a point about, we are starting Teddy Two Gloves tonight, and he has had another week to get to know the playbook more and whatnot. If he starts playing really well, and his receivers that are going to be out there, we know that St. Brown and a lot of the main guys aren't going to be on the field tonight, but if he can find a way to click with these receivers that are going to be on the field, which there's going to be some, second stringers, James Mitchell, Darrell Daniels, Daniel Helm at tight end. And of course you're going to have, we know James Williams is out, but we're going to have Antoine Green, Dylan Drummond, Chase Cota, these rookies that are coming in also battling for a spot. I think if this offensive line can hold up, and they got to hold up better than they did last week. Last week was a very poor showing. If they can hold up a little bit better and give Teddy the protection he needs, and, a guy like Chase Cota, especially because he's still been one of my favorites of the preseason, If these guys can find the rhythm, and Teddy improves, I see no reason why they can't get in the end zone. However, I am concerned, as I stated in the beginning, I am a little concerned about the fact that they are playing their first team on defense. So it's going to be a matter of these guys not only playing for, fighting for their lives for a roster spot, but I really, really hope they can play and step up their game to give Teddy Two Gloves and the receivers and our running backs a chance to get in the end zone. I think it's possible, Will. It's not going to be easy, though.
So I'm going to have to push the chat responsibility off on you. And so I know there's a few coming in there. I just can't get it to open the way that my screens are set up. I'm fighting my screens right now. But anyway, we'll get to your comments in just a minute, I promise.
Okay.
So there's been a few questions that have come in, throughout the week, and I wanted to get through a couple of these before we dive into some of the other, key points about tonight and what's going to happen next week. So this question seems to come up quite a bit, but preseason games often showcase rookie and young talent. And who are some of the standout newcomers that you believe could make an immediate impact on the team? Well, Andy's kind of already given his take on, Chase Cota and Dylan Drummond, and what, they mean to this roster if they're able to make the team and how they perform this preseason. On the other side of the ball, Jack Campbell, for whatever reason, is flying underneath the radar, and I don't know why. He's racked up quite a bit of play in the last game, and in a game where a lot of the starters were sat. They were benched. For lack of a better term, they got rest. And Jack Campbell played into the third quarter, and he did not get the start versus the Jaguars. And so I guess for me, when you're asking, who are these, standout newcomers and do you believe they can have an immediate impact on the team? All I've seen out of Jack Campbell so far is nothing but impact. It's just very quiet in the way that he's doing it. And he's doing it in a way of production. And I say it often, and I'm proud to say it's, production versus stats. And that's why he's been so quiet, is he's in there producing and he's doing what he's supposed to do and he's not making big mistakes. But I'll get into more on him in a little bit. But he's definitely someone that's really standing out. Obviously, the number one standout to me right away outside of Cota is Starling Thomas. And then right after him, Brian Branch has probably been the biggest pop of electricity on this team and might be the biggest draft steal of 2023. So to answer that question, there you go. Brian Branch, probably the draft steal. Chase Cota, where did he come from? Because the guy can ball. Jack Campbell, he's doing it quietly, but he's doing it often. He's doing it the right way. And this Lions team might have a little Darling and Starling Thomas, who could be a major impact player for this Lions team in 2023. Anything you want to add to that?
The only thing I want to say is, I got to agree with you about the thing with Jack Campbell is that he's getting, the kind of plays and playing as much as he has too. He's ultimately going to get that green dot on his helmet, and he's going to be calling this defense, when he's ready for it. I think he's ready for it. I think he's extremely underrated. To go to your point, Will, just making plays, disrupting everything. He's got great leg speed, great read of the offense, way under the radar. So that's really I got to say about him. Aside from Brian Branch, he has been the other one that's, to use your words, really popped for me as well. He's kind of been like the unsung hero amongst the draft class, I think. I don't want to say he was one of the steals, but I think he's been kind of one of the surprises for me because you never know how a pick like that's going to work out. So very happy with him. And I look forward to seeing how he's going to handle tonight's game. And that's really all I got on that note, Will. So I don't know if you want to add to it.
No, I think we're good. So a little shout out to Tim's podcast, Easy Speak at Speakeasy 330. We'll give it a listen. We'll check you out, Tim. Thanks for sharing that. And he had also mentioned that he's a huge Cota fan. When I mentioned Cota, where did you come from? He said Oregon. What I meant by that, Tim, is where the hell did he come from? Because I mean, the guy just bounced off the page and onto a field, and there he is, and he's making hella plays. So that's kind of what I meant by that. But thanks, Tim. I appreciate you being helpful tonight. That's awesome. And so Starling Thomas having a really good preseason. He is excellent preseason. The thing that really surprised me last week was the returns and what he was able to do on special teams. And again, like Dan Campbell always says, there's a couple ways you can make a team. Obviously, you can be great at what you do, but you can make a team by special teams. And if you're not a starter and you can play the hell out of special teams, you'll find a spot on this roster. So Thomas is doing it. Coda is doing it. Dylan Drummond, he's doing it, but I don't know if he's really going to have a shot. Look, this roster is limited. It's going to get cut down to 53 here in 4 days. And not everyone's going to make it. Happens every season. I just feel like this season, for whatever reason, I know the reason. It's going to be the hardest cuts we've had in a long time. And there's going to be a lot of good players that go to other teams, and these players are going to make plays for other teams. We're going to be like, man, why did we let that player go? It happens every season. But this season, I think it's going to happen a little bit more than seasons past. But the good news is we're going to have players on this team. They're going to be better, and they're going to be producing a hell of a lot more than the players that we let go, or at least we hope. Sometimes there is that player that slips through the cracks. It does happen. I hate to say, but look at Tom Brady, 7th round. It happens. I don't see that type of an individual on this team just yet, but we're getting close. We'll get back to some more chats here in just a minute. The second question that came in this week, that came in quite a bit, is as the preseason concludes, what are the key takeaways and lessons that these teams should focus on regardless of the outcome, of these exhibition games? And Andy, do you want to jump in on that question, or do you want me to roll through it?
No, roll through it, Will.
So again, the question is, as the preseason concludes, what are the key takeaways and lessons that teams should focus on regardless of the outcome of these games? And I think that there's kind of a statement in there, the games don't matter. Preseason doesn't matter at all. It used to, for whatever reason, but preseason has changed now. You're getting a lot more work in joint practices. You're not putting the starters in because you're saving them for the longer season, which has added an extra game. I mean, we haven't even seen the starters play for the Lions, but maybe one series this entire preseason. I think they got in one series, or a couple of them did. Not everybody. So what are the key takeaways and the lessons that, these teams should focus on? Well, I think we're seeing it. And it's, you get the 2s and the 3s in there as much as possible. You play them as long as you can, as often as you can, and you really boil it down to who's going to make this team. And they do it by putting the work in on the field. I feel like you're almost putting these kids out there, these young men out there to, create a tape for themselves, right? Put their body of work on tape. But it's almost shielding your stars from injury. Can these young guys hold up? Can they take the punishment? Can they go out there and do the work? And this is how you're going to see it, is in these preseason games. So I think the keys and, the lessons to take away from these preseason games is, number one, how deep is your roster going to be when it comes cut day? You're going to see that, by the work these guys put in, and be able to tell, can these guys really play if somebody goes down? Did they grow? Did they elevate their game from preseason 1 to preseason 3? Were they able to elevate and transition? Were they able to adapt, to the schemes and make the changes, during the game that has been asked of them to make? So I think those are the few, points or lessons, takeaways, whatever you want to call it, that I would be looking for. I just want to see them getting better every day, and working harder and staying healthy. And, after the game, how do they take care of their body? The next morning, are they ready to go and they're getting right after it and they're trying to fix their mistakes? Are they taking ownership, of themselves? Because, these guys are young, and we've already seen some immaturity issues. this is a good way to see how mature these players are going to be. Are they going to, do the work, put in the work, and then take care of themselves on the back end? All right, what do we got for some chat questions there, Andy?
Well, we got Tim again here. We got, who do you guys believe will be a surprise cut that makes us all scratch our heads? That's a good question.
Tim, can we answer that one in just a few minutes? And the reason why is I want to get through some of these players that I want to talk about on the DB side, and I think that you might get my answer right there. So, do you got an answer right away, Andy, or do you want to wait too?
Well, actually, I got just another comment he made right after that. He said that he heard. Let me put it this way, Tim. I heard a local radio station naming James Houston as a potential cut.
Yeah, I've heard that too, and I think that local radio station is full of caca, because James Houston isn't going anywhere, and if he does, I would hope the Lions are smart enough to try to pull off a trade. But you know what? They've probably already been trying to do that if he was going to be cut. And if they even thought for 1 second that he was going to be cut, yeah, I don't see that happening.
There's no way they're going to cut him. No way.
I mean, you don't have 8 sacks in 7 games and then get cut the next season just because he was a pass specialist last year and primarily played on third downs. And now this year you're asking him to have a bigger, more well-defined role and be more versatile. They'd really have to love Julian and Romeo Okwara to cut Houston, is my opinion. My official, unofficial opinion is they would really have to love Julian Okwara and Romeo Okwara for 2023 and beyond to cut Houston. And then the funny thing is, Houston's in that hybrid role. So he's an outside linebacker and he's an edge rusher. He plays both. So getting rid of somebody either at the linebacker position or an edge rusher could make room for a James Houston either way. But, doesn't that speak volumes to Brad Holmes and in how he assembles his rosters, though? I mean, you look at this roster from a versatility standpoint, I would venture a guess without really looking at it right now that more than 50% of these players on defense play alternate positions or can. All right, I'm sorry, 50% of the players on this team play alternate positions. Now, I know a lot of them can play, multiple positions or have, but I'm saying play it at a high level. Especially speaking about the DBs. You've got multiple guys in there that can come down and play in the nickel, free safety, strong safety, cornerback, and that versatility in depth is what wins games in postseason. All right, moving forward here. Next question that came in this week. This is a good question too. With limited playing time for the starters or the star players, how do coaches strike a balance between preparing their team and minimizing risk of injuries in these games? Andy, what do you got on this one?
Well, for that one, I mean, yes, you are limiting the starters. I kind of alluded back to, you'd like to see the starter start to kind of, I think you try to find that rhythm to get him back in the rhythm for when the season actually starts. But again, to what the point you made just a bit ago, Will, is that you're putting the second and third stringers in there to basically shield them from any type of serious injury. I mean, we don't want to see Goff or Gibbs or any of these guys that are going to be the definite starters for the team. We don't want to lose them for the season. We've worked too hard. We've got too good of a roster and too good of a team put together to have anything like that happen. So it's striking the balance. I mean, it comes because I know on Tuesday's practice this week, they were hitting it hard. They were scrimmaging hard. The starters were, and that was the way that I felt that they got into the rhythm for these guys. So even though they won't be in a rhythm to play in a preseason game, which we go back to what we said, preseason game doesn't count for much. It doesn't go on the record. There's no real stats that are going to really be pressing on anything. But that's what I feel is how you do strike that balance. You do keep the starters involved on the field during the preseason. as they're watching what's going on in the second and third stringers, I'm sure they're making mental notes about what they need to do when they actually, in fact, take over that starting role. The balance to me is when you're playing a very intense practice like they've done this week while you're still waiting for the season to start. That, to me, it's a learning lesson for the starters. It's a learning lesson for the second and third stringers. That's the kind of balance that I see that is happening right now. Again, like I said, I really wish that maybe some of the main starters would start for either this game or the previous games, just a few reps. Didn't work out that way. So that's what I see is a good balance when it comes to that kind of situation, Will.
So to piggyback off of that, I think that the balance is right in line with your practice statement there. And the Lions brought in joint practices this season. And they brought in 2 teams. They ran 4 joint practices. And I think there's the balance that defines it right there. In previous seasons, Matt Patricia was the first head coach to bring in joint practices that I can remember and still played the starters in the preseason. But what we saw this year was a flip-flop, and preseason has changed. And I alluded to that in a couple of previous shows ago, how the preseason is totally different. Now it's just about evaluating your younger roster and your newbies, your UDFAs and your rookies. And it's about evaluating the guys that you're bringing in off the street to see if they're worth it. In practice is now relegated to high energy, high impact joint practices where you're able to get the work in like a game situation and go up against, opponents, not the same team every day, right? That's the balance. And that's how they're able to keep these guys fresh. Do I feel personally that it's enough? I don't. I still feel like there has to be an element, to your point, of getting in a rhythm. And that rhythm is critical. I know that Goff and St. Brown have been getting in a rhythm all winter long. And that's great. And a matter of fact, I'm going to share something. I was listening to Amendola on the Kelsey Brothers podcast. I think it's called Newer Heights or something like that. And he made a point of emphasis on being able to play and then practice. And he said, I only retired because I couldn't practice. I could go out and play. He could have suited up any game he wanted to without practicing. Belichick wouldn't have had a problem with that. Maybe he would have, but they would have put him on the field. He retired because he couldn't wake up the next day and go to practice because his knees hurt so bad. And he's the type of guy that has to feel it. He has to get in a rhythm. He has to stay in a rhythm. He has to practice to play. And that is a lost art in this day and age of where, and I know it's only been, 5 years or so since he retired. I don't even know if it's been that long. But that old school mentality of practice hard, play hard, right? Or you're going to play like you practice or practice like you play. They all intertwine and mesh. And I feel like today, if you're not practicing, if you're not taking the reps and you're not getting in a rhythm, or you don't want to practice and you just want to play, you're not going to be successful. And I'm not saying that's what's happening here in Detroit. I'm just saying overall big picture. Why do you think Mahomes, Andy Reid, and the Chiefs have been so good for the last 5 years? They practice. They play in preseason. They gather in the offseason. Travis Kelce piggybacked off of what Amendola was saying and said, furthermore, beyond practice, when they were doing some personal things, they were going to a family member or significant other's volleyball game or something like that. And he said that nobody could find Mahomes. Patrick was missing. He was the one that organized it, I guess, and was missing, right? Well, he was found out in the car going through pages and pages and pages and pages of notes for the upcoming game. And Travis said it was like chicken scratch, only he could read it. And there was just piles of paper, and you could tell that that's all he's been working on. And he said the reason why we win is because your quarterback has to have a little bit of nerd in him. And Patrick, he said, is a big nerd. He knows numbers. He sees things. He can analyze things a lot quicker than, your average human. So to give you the long-winded answer here about the balance and how things, work together and how you keep, the performance on the field when these starters aren't playing in preseason, it all goes back to your core values and how much you're going to put into it off the field too. So if you're not in the game, in preseason, you better take all the reps you can in practice. And if you're not able to make practice, you better take all the mental reps you can at practice and at home. And that's what the greats do. Tom Brady, there was another analogy with Tom Brady. He was the same way. He was constantly flying coaches out, whether it was the off season, whether it was the bye week, whether it was summer vacation, didn't matter. Brady was always putting somebody in his back pocket to go and throw with, and elevate his game with. And that's why he was able to do it for so long. So practice does matter. It really does. And so do these preseason games. And again, I'm not saying that the Lions are failing. I know and I understand that they're trying to protect the roster. They've got a big game on the 7th of September, and that's what they're gearing up for. And anyway, we'll move on from there. Anything you want to add, Andy?
Yeah, it goes along with the point you made about Patrick Mahomes, being a nerd. I cited some sources. I believe I think you want to say it was Jameson Williams of all people. I believe it was, but you look at Amon-Ra St. Brown, he is catching passes and balls on the practice field with that, that machine, what's it called, where they put the ball in it and basically chucks it at you.
Jugs
there you
machine?
Go. The jugs machine. Sorry, I mental blank. But he'll stand there for hours just catching balls. And then to top that off, Amon-Ra could literally have a 160-yard game with, say, 10 catches and 3 touchdowns. The way his mind works, though, if within that game he dropped one ball, he doesn't care how good of a game he had. That one ball he dropped will actually overtake him mentally than the great actual game that we could say that he had. So go to your point, Will. Practice matters. And a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown, there's a reason why that rhythm again. We go back to that rhythm. I wish I could see more of him and Goff because they are best friends on the field, the rhythm they're in. I wish I would have seen it more. I think a lot of us do. But just, you're right. The Andy Reids, the Mahomes, the Amon-Ra's, there's a reason why they are as good as they are. That's just a little thing I wanted to add on to what you were, going on about with Patrick and with Julian Edelman and whatnot. It's the practice and putting in the time is the difference between a team that's winning all the time or a team that's mediocre and not doing good all the time. So that's a 2 cents I want to put in, my friend.
Yeah, so and it also goes back to what Dan Campbell says too, and he always mentions the term time on task. And when you speak about players like Jameson Williams, who's not able to get the time on task right now, and really hasn't since he's been in the NFL, it sparks the question, right? Is he ever going to be ready? Is he ever really going to be able to grow and develop if he's not able to get the time on task and he's not able to get into, a practice rhythm, a throwing rhythm? I mean, every time he comes into the league, he exits the league, for whatever reason for a period of time. And that, you get rusty because you're not throwing with Jared Goff. You're sitting at home. And, who are you going to be working with that's able to give you that same impact and rhythm that your own quarterback is? And the answer is nobody. And, he can go work on his catching ability and the way that he catches the ball and things of that nature with anybody or even a jugs machine. But building the rhythm and continuity with your own quarterback is impossible to do without your own quarterback. So next question that came up this week, and then I'm going to dive into some of the topics of who will likely play tonight and rest. Let's see, what time do we got right now? We are at 6:43, so we got to hustle. Well, I guess this next question kind of goes, into tonight. We already covered this one actually. But which players on the roster bubble are you keeping an eye on during the preseason matchups, and how could their performance impact the final roster decisions? mean, great question. The last question was talking about the ones on defense versus offense, and how our team is going to be able to, elevate their game tonight, when our 2s and 3s are going against their 1s. We already answered that one earlier. But getting back to this other question here, which players on the roster bubble are you keeping an eye on during this preseason matchups? Well, and to answer Tim's question, I think we're going to get into right here. So my first set of topics tonight on tonight and who to watch, who to look for, and kind of what's going on. I'm just going to give you a brief little summary here. Talking about the DBs. In 2022, the Lions kept 11 DBs on their initial roster after 53-man cuts. I believe the breakdown was 6 cornerbacks and 5 safeties. At this point, I think that the DB room is going to be the most difficult room to sort out, especially for anybody, from an analyst perspective or a media perspective or a fan's perspective, because when you look at this and you look at all this versatility, it's almost impossible to want to, cut somebody because you've got so much versatility, somewhere else that it almost makes sense to keep that person. But from the top down, we're going to expect Cam Sutton and Jerry Jacobs to take a seat on this one tonight. They're not going to get any playing time that's expected. So we do expect a heavy dose of Starling Thomas and Stephen Gilmore. I would expect to see, was it Khalil Dorsey getting in on the dime packages, maybe even in on some of the nickel packages tonight. I think that this fourth and fifth spot is primarily relegated, to Thomas and Gilmore. I think Dorsey is the odd man out. But the interesting component to this is Emmanuel Mosley. Is he going to be on IR? Is he going to be on a reserve pup or active pup? Because depending on those designations, it depends on whether his spot is going to count on the roster and whether or not he can come back for a minimum of 4 weeks. If it were me, Mosley's on pup to start the season. He doesn't count towards the roster. He can't come back for at least 4 weeks. So then you're going to have Cam Sutton, Jerry Jacobs, Starling Thomas, Stephen Gilmore, Khalil Dorsey, rounding out your cornerbacks, and that would make 5. Emmanuel Mosley would be the 6th when he comes back. So the Lions still might keep an extra cornerback on this roster, but see, this is where it gets tricky, because then you bounce down to the nickel. We expect Branch to take a seat tonight. He didn't play last week, so he's going to get some rest. I think that tells you what he's, where he's at in this roster. I believe that he is the starting nickel for this 2023 Lions. And I think that the battle is between Will Harris and Chase Lucas. At the same time, I could see them keeping Branch, or of course Branch is going to be there, but I could see them keeping Harris and Lucas, because Branch can also slide up and play corner if needed, but he can also slide backward and play safety. It's that versatility. Branch is going nowhere, but can Will Harris or Chase Lucas really play either one of those other 2 positions? They can't. Will Harris might be able to step in and play corner, like if he really had to. But I see him actually dropping back the other way and playing safety. So when you drop down to safety, so nickel spot, you got Branch, Will Harris, or Chase Lucas. So I think they'll keep at least 2 there, maybe 3. At safety, we're obviously expecting C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Kirby to sit out tonight, and I think Kirby has now won that position as a starting safety over Tracy Walker. The reason why I say that is Walker is primarily been with the 2s, and I don't know if that's, is it an abundance of caution, right? Are they, is he going through a slow rehab process and they're just making sure that he doesn't injure himself further? They've got plenty of depth right now and they're kind of, slowing him back to the roster. Or has Joseph, really just elevated his game this season and he's outplayed Walker? I mean, we knew C.J. Gardner-Johnson wasn't going to sit behind Walker. But there again, you have more versatility. CJ Gardner-Johnson can bounce up into the nickel, and he can play both safety positions. He could play cornerback if he really needed to. CJ Gardner-Johnson's a utility knife in that DB room. The thing that I like to see, though, is now you got two guys that are unheard of. They're going to get a lot of time tonight, and that's Brady Breeze and Brandon Joseph. The reason for that is Ifeatu Melifonwu and Savion Smith were injured in Tuesday's practice. They weren't visible at Monday's. I'm sorry, they were injured in last week's game, and they weren't involved in Tuesday or Wednesday's practice. So does that mean that they're not going to make this roster now since they're not able to go out tonight? Before I finish on the DBs and get to my who could potentially be cut, what do you got to add to this, Andy?
Well, it's really interesting you brought up the safety position. I think the emergence of Kirby Joseph, especially from last year, we can all think back to the Green Bay game, of course, with against Aaron Rodgers and the way he played in that game. I think that is why Tracy Walker's not at where he needs to be. I think the emergence of Kirby Joseph is going to slot into that position. Like you said, CJ, GJ, and Kirby Joseph are locked in. I would have liked, hopefully, Melly Mel now, and I have a hard time pronouncing his name. So I think, Will, I know you know what I mean when I'm saying Melly Mel, Melifonwu. There we go. I apologize. He's hurt, so that could be an issue. And we're going to see Brady Breeze. We're going to see Brandon Joseph. I remember we saw a little bit of Brady Breeze last week. Not much of an impact, but he's going to have a shot tonight, considering this is going to be it. So, Brian Branch being a lock, because he's just so versatile. It's almost ridiculous how versatile he is, and that's basically what I'm looking for. That's the kind of thing I'm looking for tonight. I think you and I are in agreement, those spots that are going to be on the line and why they're going to wind up going with where they are. Tracy Walker, I hope he has a big game. I really do, because I think he's a nice player. But again, like I said, I think with the emergence of Kirby Joseph and how well he came alive and came in his own, that's what put him down the depth chart. And I'm not concerned about him getting cut so much, but an emerging player comes up, it goes back to like what Dan Campbell would say, you want to go earn it. And I think he's earned himself in a second string role, not so much as, where Kirby Joseph's at. So that's really all I got to add to what you're going for here, Will.
So I kind of lied. So I really don't have an interesting cut. I apologize, Tim. That'll be in the next segment here when I go into the linebackers. I just had to help you stick around for just another minute if you're still in watching us. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory for this one. I think the Lions keep 11, in the DB room again. I guess we're going to have to wait and see what kind of happens tonight. The interesting thing to this is, and Tim, I guess I do feel like it would be interesting if Iffy or Savion Smith were cut, but it really depends on their injury status. So if they are injured, they could get, an injury settlement and waived just because of the way the roster needs to get handled right now, and they need players to step in and play. I do feel like it's really interesting that Tracy Walker has had a lot of time on the field in the preseason, and it makes me wonder, have the Lions had second thoughts on Tracy Walker? So if there is an interesting cut, I feel like it's going to be Tracy Walker. I just don't see it happening. Here's a switch for you, and that's Brian Branch. The guy is electric, beyond electric, and the guy makes plays. He's a baller. He's earned his way, as a starter on this team. I think he's going to slide into that nickel position, and that's why, CJ Gardner-Johnson sliding back at safety instead of playing nickel is creating some headaches for Tracy Walker. But, I feel like this is more, less of a battle than it is a preference between Brian Branch or, Tracy Walker or, CJ Gardner-Johnson. I just feel like you can't keep Branch off the field. No matter what happens, the guy's doing something big, and he's done something big in every practice that I've been to and in the scrimmages that we watched, through Lions media. The guy's just making plays. And as you may have seen in our intro video, I hope you all, give us a thumbs up on YouTube for our new intro video. I hope you like it. But we highlighted Brian Branch and his hit, against Beasley. I mean, that was the way to start the preseason. And that's why you can't keep him off the field. So anyway, I digress on the DBs. Maybe not. So Campbell did say after the game last week, that when Melifonwu and Smith, both sustained injuries, that there could be impacts moving forward to anybody that's not able to play. So we'll see what happens, in the next 4 days. No matter what we're going to find out in 4 days, it doesn't even matter what we say or what we think. All right, linebackers. So this is where it gets interesting. Jack Campbell, for whatever reason, the guy has been getting a ton of playing time. I have not heard or read anything about him not playing tonight. I do expect him to get some time on the field again tonight, especially if the ones are going to be on the field. I feel like Jack's got to be there, and he's got to help lead this linebacking core and, get more time on task like Campbell always says. He played into the third quarter last week versus the Jaguars. But this brings up an interesting question, right? He looked just as good, as he did in the first preseason game, as he did in the second preseason game, as he has all, training camp long. He's been solid in coverage, versus the 2s and the 3s. I feel like his play's been stellar so far, and he's been really impressive. Why is he not starting? Let me take that back. Why is he getting so much playing time when Anzalone is the only one not playing? He's the only one resting out of the linebackers. Why is Campbell, is he put doubt into the Lions, coaching staff that he doesn't have it down yet? Is he missing something? Has he not proven himself? Or is this just a way of saying, look, we know you got it. We just want you to fine-tune some things, and we want you to get after it, get some more time on task, and, come out banging week 1. But my question to everybody would be this. Who's starting come week 1? Would you trust Jack Campbell or Alex Anzalone to start week 1 and take on Mahomes? Let us know in the comments. Put it in the chat. Let us know. Let's have a conversation about it. Does Jack Campbell start week 1 versus Kansas City? Or does Alex Anzalone, and why? So my surprise cut out of the linebackers is simple. It's linebacker / edge rushers, because they've got this hybrid thing going on. It makes things confusing some days. I feel like Romeo Okwara, Julian Okwara might be on the bubble. And I know that they had a great game last week, but they're getting the majority of the snaps. Last week, Romeo Okwara and Julian Okwara had the first and second most snaps out of the entire defense. And James Houston came in at third. That's why I feel like James Houston is not getting cut. He got the third most snaps. There's a reason why Romeo and Julian got the most snaps. There's a reason why they, completely renegotiated, the contract for Romeo. You had Malcolm Rodriguez, who, had like the 7th most snaps, and Derek Barnes only got in on 15 plays. Trevor Nowaski barely played, so I don't feel like he's going to make the roster or has any sort of a chance. Anthony Pittman and Jalen Reeves-Maben hovered in the middle of the snap count. So when you look at this, and if you were to just base it on play time alone, I would say that Malcolm's a lock, Derek Barnes is a lock, Maben is a lock, Campbell's a lock, and Houston is a lock. Now, the last year, the Lions, they kept. How many did they keep last season? 5? They kept 5 edge and 5 linebackers. Yes. So all of those guys should be able to make the roster, no problem. I just feel like Romeo and Julian, one of those two is on the bubble. That's just me. And that's who I'm looking for tonight to see how well they produce. Andy, what do you got to add to a lot of that? I know I rambled there for a minute, but what do you got to add to?
No, you're fine. Yeah, I'm actually citing this out of an article I read. I believe it was, I want to say it was Pride of Detroit. And if I'm wrong, I apologize. But there was actually a rumor that the Giants and Lions were exploring a trade for Julian. I think realistically, since he's been playing pretty well, I think the Lions would probably be seeking a first-round pick for it, which I don't think they're going to get. But no, they won't get it. But, I mean, I could see where the mindset would be for Brad Holmes if he's going to let a player like that go.
He might be a second-round pick.
Yeah, that would be more formidable. I mean, we take sometimes what we read with a grain of salt, but that'd be a high ask. And again, I don't see that happening. I don't see or any team for that matter, for a player like that, sacrificing a first-round pick just to get him. I agree with you about Julian. It would be.
Hold on, Andy. Where did you read that someone was going to offer a first-round pick or first-round pick potential?
I'd have to. I'm going to look. I'll look it up again. I'll look it up again real quick, Will. But I did read that the Giants were in it, again, it's a rumor, but Giants were willing to possibly trade for him. But the asking price was pretty high. So that's why I do agree with you. I think Julian will get cut, but I don't think they're going to trade him away. Unless the Lions get something big out of it, which I just don't think they're going to get unless they ask for maybe a third or a fourth round pick out of him. Give me a second, Will. I am looking it up right now.
Oh no, it's all right. I'm just really curious or interested that someone would even think that Julian would be worth a first round pick. Like, I mean, Jalen Ramsey didn't even get a first round pick.
No, he didn't.
So, I mean, the guy is worth me. Whoever you read that from, they should turn in their WordPress license right now.
Well, and that's why I have to say I have to confirm it because I looked at quite a bit of articles today before the show, so that's why I want to confirm.
So Julian's on his last legs with the Lions this season. He'll be an unrestricted free agent next year. It's really hard to trade somebody in their last year of their contract. That's why I feel like he's on the roster bubble anyway. And then Romeo, I think I said it backwards earlier. Romeo's contract was the one that was renegotiated, not Julian, or restructured completely. Not even restructured, renegotiated. Come on, we'll get it together. So I think they're both on the bubble. I mean, I'm glad that they got some sacks against second and third team, guys, but the fact remains that's not going to happen against first string guys unless they're able to work as a unit and not individuals and play within the scheme and can stay healthy. And I just don't think either one of these two guys have been able to do that since they've been in Detroit, and they've been flashes in the pan, while they've been there. And yeah, I think it's time to move on. I would much rather keep somebody like a James Houston over a Julian or a Romeo. So there's my surprise cuts. I feel like one of the Acquar brothers is definitely going to be gone. I don't think they're going to be traded. I do feel like they're definitely going to have a cut there in here in a few days. If not tomorrow, we might see cuts start tomorrow. I think that they will probably start sending guys packing on definitely by Sunday. Start clearing out this roster and making some room. And sorry, I got a text here from a guest that's going to pop on. Andy, why don't you jump into something real quick? I'm going to send out an invite here to Brian Flores, and we'll get him to come on here for a minute.
Well, actually, Will, if I'm going to bring something up, I wanted to zero back in on Teddy Bridgewater starting for tonight's game. We talked earlier about how the Carolinas can be playing their starters on the offense and the defensive side tonight. And I was really, really earlier today trying to dig in to find out if the Lions were going to start any of their starters, and they're not, as we obviously already have covered. But we know that Teddy's playing. So my biggest focus to that one was, you don't want to say how important this is to the game because, again, we go back, it's a preseason game. But my thought process is, how important is it for Teddy to make an improvement over the way he played last week? He's only been with the team for a few weeks. When he came into that game last week, he had already come in with not a lot of time to prepare, new offensive coordinator, new schemes, new playbook, and then the other factor of second and third string players. Now he is going to be playing again tonight with second and third string players again. We know Teddy's safe. We know he's not going to go anywhere. He's a definite lock on the roster. But my biggest thing is, what are we looking to get out of Teddy tonight? I think he's going to show quite a bit of improvement. I don't think he's going to be lightning like we know he can be, because, again, he is learning this system. He's going to be out there with the second and the third stringers. I'm really anxious to see Teddy play. I really hope he does a lot better tonight. But it is important that we see that he's shown that he's learned this system a lot more and better, with the fact that he's had a week now of practice, of studying the playbook. I expect him to make a big jump in his play tonight. We know Teddy's got the arm talent. We know he's got the speed. We know he can scramble if he has to. That's one of my topics I wanted to bring up for tonight was, hopefully we see an emergence of Teddy compared to what I saw him last week. Will, I don't know.
I think it's a great topic. Yeah, no, I think it's a great topic of discussion here and I want to get to some of these chats. I'm going to leave this one up here for just a second here from Tim and Eric Whitson said, "Go Lions." Thanks, Eric. And thanks, for everybody jumping in the chat tonight. Looks like it's finally working. We've had trouble with it the last few weeks. So Teddy B, here's what I saw last week. Got his ass kicked. And that's because the second team, third team O-line, they were like glass, man. They just they got beat. They got Matt Nelson is a problem. He's got to go. And I'm not even going to be able to get into the offensive side of the ball tonight, I don't think, just because game time's coming up. We're going to have to jump off here in a little bit. But, Teddy B, we've got to see that he's got to get protection. I don't really feel that he's going to have a lot of problem with the ones. We got a top 5 offensive line in this league, so I don't think there's going to be any issue there. But like he said, and like the rest of the coaching staff is stressed, it's just learning the verbiage in the playbook, and Teddy will be fine. My only concern, and I'll have to look at this stat, is how many fumbles has he had throughout his career? And I know there's a reason why he wears the gloves is for grip. And there was that analogy that was made between him and Kenny Pickett, and Teddy kind of having the same issue with dropping balls or losing balls, and I don't want to see that ugly head get reared in Detroit with a lot of fumbles at the quarterback position. So let's just hope he doesn't have to play. I don't know why our wording is now pink again, but it looks like Brian is in the back room here. I'm going to let him in here in just a second. So let me get to this first statement or question here. I can't really see this chat. I believe it'll be Alex Barnes to start the season, but at some point I expect to be Alex and Campbell both playing. Yeah, I could see that. The only issue is Alex and Campbell both play the same. So unless Alex is going to kick outside, Campbell's going to be in the middle. But I think that they could be a little interchangeable. It's just depends on what scheme they're running, right? If they're running 3 linebackers, that's different than running 4. And so it really depends on if they're in a 3-4 or 4-3, or if they're in a nickel or it just depends on what package they're running. But let's welcome Brian. I don't see him now. We'll welcome Brian in here. So Brian, there he is. Welcome, Brian Flores. Brian is in California. He's joining us. I don't know what city you're in, Brian, but welcome to our Rock Down Detroit Lions Off the Cuff podcast tonight. Brian is going to be joining us. He is a play-by-play announcer. He has a lot of history in doing this type of work, and hell of a content creator from what we understand. So Brian's going to be joining us on some shows and writing some articles. And thanks for jumping in, Brian. What do you got to say tonight?
Nothing much. Just thank you guys for having me. It's going to be an exciting season, especially here for the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, it is. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Can you pull up the next chat there? Andy, there was a question about wide receiver help. Here, I got it. Lions obviously need wide receiver help. Diggs isn't happy in Buffalo. Do you make a phone call, and what would you offer? I know his list was 1 Dallas. I can't see the rest of that.
He said 1 Dallas, 2 Bears, and 3 49ers.
Oh, his list. Okay, so first of opportunity. You know, I think that, you know, getting players that are not happy are definitely what this team doesn't need right now.
No.
You don't want disgruntled employees entering your building. You know, it's wrong time. I think it's bad timing. I think that if, you know, a player gets cut, that's one thing. You know, you bring them in, it's a different story. But if they're visibly upset, audibly upset, and they've made it known that they're upset, I don't think you take a chance on those type of character issues. What do you have to say on that, Brian? Would you agree or disagree?
I kind of agree, but you know, again, you know me as the hockey guy. The Kings had a similar thing with one of their recent pickups, and to that end, I would say, you know, depending on the talent, Stephon Diggs is a great wide receiver, and I think he'd be an asset for Jared Goff, especially with Amon-Ra St. Brown on the other side of him. You know, you have 2 great guys that can go down the gridiron. And you do make a good point, though. You do not want a head case, especially in what it is an infancy of post rebuild here for the Lions. You don't want to bring something that, you know, tears down years upon years of just rebuilding just because you have a hunch that someone's going to be outperforming. So in my opinion, you know, if you were to ask me the risk versus reward, I wouldn't take Diggs with the amount of emotional turmoil that he's going through right now. But, you know, if you were later down on the rebuild and you had, you know, a solid, like the Detroit Lions have a solid team right now, but I would venture to say they're still searching for their identity. And that is a critical and fragile time for any franchise. So if you were to add a head case like that, you know, into the Detroit Lions, you know, atmosphere, it could either make or break the team. And it would be up to Stephon Diggs to kind of bolster himself up and bolster up his team and allow his team to grow. So overall, Diggs is a great football player, and I would say bar none one of the best wide receivers, but I would have to again question what you said as well. Just what is he going to bring to the locker room, and how is he going to affect the locker room overall?
Andy?
Yeah, I agree with Brian on that one too, because I can think about when DeAndre Hopkins got on the market again. You know, there was a lot of talk. I would hear, you know, in comments on our Detroit Lions group and even our Rocked On Detroit Lions that we should make a push for DeAndre Hopkins. And I think he's actually right up there with Diggs. I think there's just that toxicity that you don't want to bring in. And I actually, again, Brian, one more time to enunciate your point here. I think if you were to bring in a Diggs or you bring in a DeAndre Hopkins, you know, Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, they have a very no-nonsense approach to things. And they have a locker room that, as far as we know and what we hear and we read, it's in harmony. You do not want to bring a player like that in. Now, Stephon Diggs, great receiver, no doubt about it. But disgruntled, he's going to come right into Detroit, and I could see him, you know, Amon-Ra St. Brown is a threat to him. And, you know, he's going to come in wanting to be number one. So, no, I don't think you make a move for Stephon Diggs at all. I think you just leave it as it is and let someone else have him and have to deal with him.
You know, so similar – oh, go ahead, sorry.
Yes, I think you make a good point there, Andy, and that's, you know, sharing the ball, right? Everyone's going to want their feed, and the reason why Diggs is unhappy right now is he's unhappy with the way that the offense is headed in the direction and the focus, and he's not getting fed the ball enough. But if you look at his stats, it sure looks like he was. Right. So, yeah, stepping into a new offense that does have an identity with Amon-Ra and Goff, I don't see how that would fit. So I guess to answer the question is no, I wouldn't make the call. I wouldn't offer him anything. I think that you try to find, you know, some guys, you know, after cuts and try to fill out the roster help there. But honestly, I think that the Lions wide receiver core is solid. But I want to make one other point. We've already got a head case in Jameson Williams right now, and I only say that because the guy's constantly embattled in something. It's always something. So I don't think we need another something to cloud up the room. I think that they need to get stronger and not weaker. Myers Farm, good to see you back in the chat. How you doing? Hope you're doing well. Where's Ozigbo been? I have no idea. The Lions picked him up, I think, around August 9th. No clue. Haven't heard much about him. I mean, he's obviously a no-go anyway. He's probably the fifth man on the totem pole in the running back room. I think that the Lions have got the running back room kind of rounded out at this point with who they're going to keep. So, Brian, I don't know how much you were able to catch, if you're able to see some of this, but what we were talking about tonight and going through some of the questions that had come in throughout the week, basically was, what are we looking for out of this Detroit Lions team that is primarily going to start second and third stringers tonight going up against Carolina's ones, at least in, the first quarter or a portion thereof. And, not starting the starters at all in the preseason. How would that make you feel, headed into week one against the Super Bowl champs, that the Lions haven't developed any rhythm, at least on TV, in front of everybody, watching them on TV? They haven't developed any rhythm, but they've been doing it through joint practices. Do you feel like the Lions can still be ready to go? Do you think they're playing it smart? What would be your take on not playing the starters at all in preseason?
And it's really interesting. I had a conversation because a little bit of trivia about myself is that my mom is the real Detroit Lion fan. Like, she bleeds blue when it comes to that. For me, I have a soft spot for the Chargers, and the Bolts did the same thing a couple of years ago. They did not start Herbert or Williams or Keenan Allen, especially after Allen's injury. The one thing that I'm interested on seeing is St. Brown. After what he went through this season, I am interested to see him back on the gridiron. So to answer your question about how I feel about no one starting in the preseason, I don't really think it makes too much of a difference. And especially, gaining that rhythm, I feel like the preseason is more practice for the offensive coordinator, the defensive coordinator, and just the overall head coach, just trying to see what identity do they want for their team. And especially here for the Lions, who are searching for one. And I feel like if you're going to be starting anybody, if anybody is going to be hitting that gridiron here for the preseason, I would really like to see a lot of their defensive assets start, because that's the one place I feel like the Detroit Lions kind of fizzled. They did not have a good defensive backing for Jared Goff, who was slinging the rock better than anybody, and he would make magic happen, but it would ultimately be the second half of the defense, the secondary, that would let them down. So if anybody starts preseason, I would like to see that.
I can agree with that wholeheartedly, that, Jared Goff put this team in a position to win probably 15 out of 17 games last season. Mm-hmm. They didn't do anything against the Patriots. They had a really rough time against the Panthers. But other than that, I felt like the Lions were in a position to win, or had an opportunity to win. They scored a lot of points. They were averaging, 35 points or 37 points in the first 4 or 5 games. And they ended up with, an average of 27 points throughout the entire season. That's a hell of a season. The problem was the Lions defense was averaging 26 points. You can't win games when there's only 1 point separating your defense and your offense.
Yep.
When I had and I've said this before, but when I had a conversation with Glover Quinn last season on a podcast, I asked him, that magical number that you've read about or heard about used to be 21. As long as you can keep the opposing teams under 21 points, you have a better chance to win. And he said that magic number is more like 17. So the Lions were giving up an average of 26 points. They were 9 points out of winning the majority of ball games every single week. So you're right, Brian. The defense needs to be on display. That's what we need to see going into tonight, and see what these second and third stringers are going to be able to bring to the table. You're only as good and as deep as your second stringers. You know, that's who you depend on, you know, to get some fresh legs, to get a drink of water, to take a brief break, you know, during a game. But your second stringers are very important to any NFL team, and we got to see that they can do well. Next question, Andy, go. It's on the screen there.
Yeah, we got Tim again. Tim, thank you so much for watching tonight and engaging. We love it. With JMO, are you guys leaning bust or more like an unreliable work employee who always has reasons or excuses to call off? Well,
wow. That's
Brian,
an amazing question.
I will give my take first on that one, and I'll kick it back over to my two esteemed colleagues here. I'm still not in a position to call JMO a bust. I mean, again, I'll do it one more time real quick. Last year, came in late, 1 catch, 45 yards, touchdown. Great. Not much to see there past that. This season, wanted to see him, 6-game suspension. Then he blows the hamstring, out for the rest of the preseason, still can't see much. Didn't perform well in his preseason game against the Giants. I have still so many high hopes for this guy because I know he's lightning in the bottle. I know he's got the talent. The only way as of now I can call him a bust, there's a couple ways I could call him a bust, and extremely unreliable at that too. If he comes in, this season starts, and something happens in his suspension to where he runs into trouble again and we're to say gets suspended the rest of the season, or if he comes in this season when the team should already be in a rhythm, yes, that's sorry about that, guys. That is my opinion on that one. But if he comes in when the Lions, let's just say the Lions are 6-0, by the time he comes back, he's trying to come in and do an offense that's already been established. And they slot him in there, not a lot of time, because Goff's already got St. Brown and Reynolds that he's been throwing to, and he's just fizzling out. After this season, I think this season's going to be a defining moment for him. If he doesn't shine when he comes back, that's maybe where I would say I'd start leaning towards calling him a bust. But long story short, long answer longer for you, Tim, I'm not ready to call him a bust, but I know I cannot rely on him whatsoever right now. Will, Brian, what do you got on that?
Brian, I'll let you go. But that was a great take, Andy. Go ahead, Brian. 30 seconds or less. Here we go.
Play a little devil's advocate here. Jameson Williams, I know last year kind of disappointing, 6 games, 2 receptions, and you know it really wasn't all he was cracked up to be. And I just have to put it out there. The dude is 22, and this is his second or third year playing here for the Lions, the second here with the Lions and in the show. So especially for a wide receiver, he reminds me a lot, and you know what, I bite my tongue when I say this, but he reminds me a lot of a young Antonio Brown. Hopefully he doesn't go down the myriad of problems that he was going through, but skill wise, I feel like he reminds me a lot of AB, where he turned into a real asset. So I feel like the name of the game here, especially for JMO, is patience, nurturing him and kind of veering him in the right direction, finding a way to kind of reach him. Because again, if he doesn't pan out, you still have 14 on the side that can kind of carry the load when the load gets too heavy for him.
You know, that's a great, take too. You're looking at both sides of the coin, so I'm going to try to split the middle and split the difference with my take, I guess. You both said some really good things, and that's, yes, JMO does need to be nurtured. He does need, we all need to exude a little bit of patience with somebody that's young-minded. I'm only 43, but man, I would love to be 22 again. But I wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. I wasn't the most responsible at 22 myself. It's just different when you're paid millions of dollars to do something, and you're around millionaires and billionaires every single day, and you're around this eclectic group of athletes, and you're around these amazing coaches and trainers and mentors. So the bucket of excuses should be about this big as to why you can't do your job and why you can't succeed on and off the field, because you have every resource around you. So, yes, Brian, you are 100% correct. The guy does need some nurturing. And to Andy's point, I don't think it's ever been brought up. If the guy gets in trouble while he's off, what do you think then? That's a hell of a take there, because I never even thought about the fact that if he gets in trouble while he's suspended, it would probably railroad the rest of the season, depending on what it is. Simple traffic ticket, probably not. But, anything that results in a potential misdemeanor, it could. So here's my take. I think this is a prove it year. I think that the Lions have run out of patience. They gave him all of the rope in the world, or all the time in the world last season to get his act together. He came in, he didn't know the playbook. He had some antics on the sideline that were visibly seen during games, the Green Bay game being the most notable, where he was chewing out the coaches. And then he starts off this season. I don't think he really was out practicing with Jared Goff as much as people want to believe, not like St. Brown was. But he was doing things that kind of made you ask questions, right? And then the suspension happens, and he does more things that make you ask questions or make you wonder what the heck's going on. And then it's like every other week, it was a different sort of ticky-tack injury. So my take is this. Dan Campbell was visibly not happy at the last press conference talking about Jameson Williams. It almost appeared that he's lost confidence. When you have lost confidence as a coach, it's hard to get it back. It's just like trust. Once you burn somebody's trust, it's very hard to get it back. So I feel like if Jameson comes back off a suspension, they're going to give him all of the room to grow and play and succeed this season. But if he does not, bust out and have a great last half of the season. Remember, they owe him $0 right now. All of his guaranteed money was wiped because of the suspension. He's owed nothing. So they're basically getting a free shot, a free look at a rookie that they paid a few $1 million to enter the league, who caught 2 passes for you so far. So he's got to bounce off the pages. If he does not have a good rest of the season, I think the Lions are going to wipe their hands. They might even try to trade him. Why not? He's not going to be worth much, but if they get a 7th-round pick back for somebody that didn't do anything, it only cost you a few $1 million. I mean, who wouldn't pay a few $1 million for a 7th-round pick that might be a Tom Brady in the making, or somebody else that just bounces off the page later on, like a Malcolm Rodriguez? Package him up and move up. There's a lot of options. So getting towards the end of the show, the game's on here in about a half hour. And what other things did you want to go over tonight, Andy, other than I went over James Houston? Talking about the running back room real quick, Jamar Jefferson, he was seen limping off the field on Tuesday. The Lions did have a full-on 11-on-11 scrimmage. They did about 11 or so series. So it was a very, very tough and intense practice. And they lost another guy in Jamar Jefferson. So if he's not in playing tonight, I did not see anywhere where he's going to play tonight or that he wasn't injured. He wasn't seen at Wednesday's practice. So at this point, I would say that Jamar Jefferson is probably not going to make this roster. I think that you're going to round out the roster with Gibbs and Reynolds and Monty. And beyond that, I would say that Kabinda might even be a long shot to make the roster. Lions might keep an extra tight end versus Kabinda, but we'll wait and see. But that's my take on the running backs. So for tonight, I believe that Reynolds is probably going to get the majority of the carries tonight. And outside of that, who else did we pick up on the running back room? Do you remember, Andy?
Yeah, we got Benny Snell.
Benny Snell, that's right.
Yeah, Benny Snell, and I'm right now looking at the depth chart, and it kind of goes with what our one commenter asked us. Devin Zigbo is still on the depth chart, but who knows if we're going to see him at all. Ibrahim is on injured reserve, and like you said, Jefferson's hurt. So, Reynolds didn't have a good game last week. I think I want to say he had 8 carries for 13 yards. So
we had a terrible production game, but he played well in the pass protection.
Yes, he did. He played very well in pass protection. That's very notable. So I think Reynolds, Reynolds will definitely get, I think, a bulk of the hands today, bulk of the balls. You might see Kabinda out there, but I agree with you, Will. I don't see him making a final roster spot. And actually, I didn't even think of it that way, but I could see them, putting in a tight end in there if they cut him instead, just for more depth in terms of tight ends and receivers. That's pretty much my take of the running backs. Pretty cut and dry. I mean, we know Montgomery and Gibbs are number 1, number 2, and Reynolds is going to be in there for sure. I think Reynolds would be more of a short yardage situation type running back regardless. So, that's where I think he slots in on this offense. And that's what I got on running backs for you, Will. I think that's what I expect to see tonight and going forward.
So the Lions in 2022, they kept 4 running backs, which included Kabinda. So if they have Gibbs, Monty, and Reynolds, that would be their top 3. And what's that?
I literally just read that.
Just breaking news. I just confirmed it. 49ers have traded Trey Lance to the Cowboys for a 4th-round pick.
So
oh my God,
the Niners are all in on Brock Purdy.
Yes, they are.
Oh yeah, no, we knew that. We knew that was happening.
Well, we knew that, but now it's just like all but confirmed, because now it's like if the Brock Purdy ship kind of sank, they had Lance on the back end, waiting and ready and waiting, but now it's Brock Purdy without a safety net. And you know what? I want to say good for Purdy because he deserves it, but like, man,
7th rounder,
man.
Mr. Nobody,
Mr. Irrelevant.
That's
like
right.
it's a feel good story. Don't get me wrong, but like that's a gamble. That's a move.
That's a big gamble because I know Purdy towards down the stretch he did very well, but that's what we had. That's what they had with him.
That's it.
Yeah, so now you're right, Brian. They're rolling the dice and saying, we're done with Lance. You're the man.
Remember, I think Purdy was only in for 4 games last season.
Yeah. And he played some pretty big ones, but it's like, man, it's just like, all right, like talking on like another level, I've seen this story go down where it's like, you have the hot rookie, and this is going all the way back to Amon-Ra St. Brown's time with USC, with Keaton Slovis. Slovis had the hot hand, then next year comes, and the sophomore slump hit him so hard, he literally portaled out mid-season. It's like, oh, dude. It's going to be interesting. But you know what? As a guy living in LA, this does put a smile on my face. I'm so tired of California fans, bro. I am so tired of it.
So who's your California team? Outside of the Lions, who's your California team?
The Bolts.
Bolts up, baby. But it's like,
all right.
It does put a smile on my face. I'm hoping, I don't want to prey on a dude's downfall. Like, I love Brock Purdy and what he was able to do as Mr. Irrelevant, but like, just because he's if you were on any other team, if you were on the Lions, I'd be like, oh yeah, go Purdy. I want to, but no, he's a 49er. I'm praying on it, bro. Ugh.
Well, we'll see what happens. There was some other news that came in tonight that Maurice Alexander was back at practice. So we might potentially see Maurice Alexander get in the game tonight. So big headliners for tonight is keep those eyes peeled on Chase Cota. He should get a heavy dishing of the football tonight. He's got the potential to make this roster, I think, out of any of the receivers that are on the bubble. And when you look back at 2022's roster, and that's what I like to use as a comparison here. The Lions, especially this coaching staff, have developed some trends. And I will say that Kabinda has made the roster, I think, every single season under Campbell. And I think he was injured one year, and that might have been why he was cut or placed on injured reserve prior to the season starting, which might have been last season. So for whatever reason, they like this H-back type position, fullback type position, I feel like it's a useless position. But when we look at the roster again, the Lions kept 4 running backs last season. And then you've got Maurice Alexander, who's coming back potentially to round out the wide receiver tree. If he gets in the game tonight, all bets are off that he won't be returning kicks and punts and see what he can do on special teams. But again, I haven't seen any new reports on whether he's actually going to suit up or not. And Andy, what else did you want to cover tonight before we kind of wrap up the show and get to game time? And then we got our Sunday show coming up. And before I pass it off to Andy, make sure y'all visit villainsquad.store. It is our new store. We're throwing up some meme theme type t-shirts and hoodies. We're going to be dropping some new custom designs here pretty soon. And we love your support. Right now, Lions Win will get you a code for 25% off your entire cart. If you guys have any questions or if you have any difficulties, you can feel free to email me at info@rockedonpodcastnetwork.com. But it's pretty straightforward, 25% off, no limits on what you buy. We would appreciate the help. And, they make great Christmas gifts. Hit the stadium in style. Order your villainsquad.store today. And that's all we got for tonight's show, unless Andy has something else he wants to go over.
No, I think we've covered quite a bit, Will. There's 2 more comments that came in I just want to get to just real quick. Tanner Wyatt, new guy, welcome in. He's asking, how can I call in? Well, that's something we've been talking about. Tanner, we are definitely going to get that part of our show. We really want people, like we said, we want people on the show, like Brian's on tonight. But we want to be able to have people call in, give your take, give us opinions, tell us if we're right or wrong. Just chop it up with us. We would love it. So when we get that all settled and figured out, we will let everyone know first thing. And then the next comment from Myers Farm. Myers, thanks again for sticking around. We love having you here. How has our draft from Western Kentucky been? I can't remember his name. Let me put that on the screen.
Western Kentucky. Pascal?
Yes.
Is that what he's talking about?
I think
this
so.
year or last year?
It sounds like this year. Maybe. Let me hang on, Will. Let me dive into this real quick.
Oh, Broderick Martin, right? The third round pick?
Yeah, Broderick Martin.
Broderick Martin.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. So, not a whole lot going on with him. I mean, he's had some good practices, and he has been mentored by Bugs during the offseason. There was quite a bit of times that I was out at practice that I didn't get to see the defense really doing their thing, but I did see Martin and Bugs working off to the side a couple of times as I was walking through. But Martin, in these preseason games, he's definitely somebody to keep your eye on, especially tonight. This is his last chance to really show, this Lions team what he has. But I don't think he's going anywhere. I don't think there's any risk to Martin not making this team. I think that he has a lot more to offer than what we all initially thought. During the draft, the majority of us were like, who is this guy? He wasn't on anybody's boards. He was, a 6th round pick, a 5th round pick, maybe on the majority of boards. And he was taken as early as he was because that's who Brad Holmes wanted. So there's a reason for it. The guy's got immense power and strength and length, and he's able to gobble up 2 gaps all at once. And hopefully we'll see that on display tonight. I expect him to get a lot of playing time. Thanks, Tim. We appreciate you, man. And look, we're on Fridays and Sundays. Fridays are generally 6:30. Sundays will be right after the games once the season starts. We will have our week 1 kickoff, which is going to be on the 6th of September, our primer to the Kansas City game. And we're going to be giving out some Villain Squad apparel for people that jump on in the show. We'll be putting some things out and get you guys to get entered for that. As you know, we're the only podcast group out of the Detroit Lions team that is giving away free stuff. So do us a favor, like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube at Rocked On Podcast Network. Share with your friends and family. And as always, go Lions, one pride. And Brian, thanks for coming on tonight. Would you like to leave our fans with anything before we go?
Just go Lions. And
thank you.
Hopefully it's a good season, and it will be a good season. Just got to clean up some stuff on the defensive end, and after that, man, take a look out for those Lions, man. They're going to be a very big force in the NFC North, definitely.
Absolutely, the Kings of the North. All right, well, that's it for the Rock Down Detroit Lions and Off the Cuff podcast. We'll see y'all on Sunday, and we'll wrap up kind of what happened in tonight's game. We'll stick around for a few minutes, guys, after the show. Hold on, here we go.
So, we look like we're ready. But this is day one. It's about the work. And I've said that from day one, and it'll always be the same message. It's about work. You got to go earn your right every year. It doesn't matter what the players are, the coaches, expectations, where you were, where you're going. We got to work, man.
Wants to throw it to Stewart. He caught it. He stole the first down. Oh, yes. The big man dives down to the 31-yard line. Oh, that is beautiful.
Let me tell you something. I love this team now. I got goosebumps, gentlemen. I love this team.
Fields looking, pressured, hit from behind, taken down. Aiden Hutchinson got him.
What do you think about the secondary?
Just look at the name, CJ Gardner-Johnson. You drafted Branch.
It started off with that huge hit on Beasley.
McCollum bends out. There's a big hit right away. And boom!
Touchdown, Detroit Lions. Amon-Ra St. Brown. Goff dropped it in the bucket that time.
We're in our window now to win.
Aaron Rodgers exits the NFC North as a loser.